Kingdom Hearts is a series with a lot of bosses. Some easy, some hard, some... well, they're a thing. While the first game may not have the best bosses in the series, it still has some highlights. You probably guessed that though, since, you know, the title and the thumbnail. Anyway, I'm not good at introductions, so let's go into number 5. God Armor. This boss fight shows you pretty early in the game that enemy design isn't always what you would assume. This boss is made up of 5 parts, 2 feet, 2 arms and a body. The body has a limit to the amount of damage it can take based on which parts have been destroyed, meaning you have to kill every single part in order to defeat this boss. In traditional turn-based JRPGs, the multiple boss fight generally pops up at least once for the entire game. And while at first sight you would expect it to work a little bit less well in the 3D hack-and-slash gameplay style, this boss fight really just gets it right. A great early game boss to show how these developers know what they're doing. Maleficent Dragon. From an early game boss fight, we're going right into the ending of the game. The story has been set up for Maleficent to be the great evil you have to face, and then when you actually beat her in a rather anticlimactic battle, Riku shows up and unlocks the power inside her heart, which transforms her into her dragon form. This, again, is a boss fight which is slightly different from the usual. You see, in Kingdom Hearts 1, most boss fights are a matter of mashing X, dodging every now and then and maybe heal if you need to. The simple fact that this boss fight's head is elevated ever so slightly up into the sky changes the part of that dynamic. Add to that the fact that the fire will make it hardly possible at all to stand in front of her, so hitting her is gonna be a rarity, and when you get to it's not gonna be a lot of damage you can put out. You got yourself a very interesting boss fight on your hands. Sephiroth. Of course he would be on here. This guy is by far the most powerful and difficult boss in the original Kingdom Hearts 1. Of course the final mix version introduced a whole new badass fight, but in OG times it's all about Sephiroth. To start off, he has a massive amount of HP and defense to go with it. Because of the way health bars work in Kingdom Hearts 1, you don't even know how much damage you're doing for the first phase or so of the fight. Oh yeah, now that I mention it, this fight has a good number of phases, every one more difficult and fast-paced than the last one. In Kingdom Hearts 2, a fast-paced boss fight isn't that big of a deal. I mean, at the end of the day, most of them are. But in this game, Sora doesn't play anywhere near as fast and isn't quite as responsive, making this boss fight a true test of skill. Of course, I should manage that this fight is an optional super boss, for the few of you who hadn't figured that out yet. The entire Ansem sequence. I know this is strictly speaking not one boss fight, and the whole sequence even gets interrupted by a random fight against the dark side, but this whole sequence takes about half an hour for the final boss. That by itself is awesome, but it also does much more. Of course you have to fight against Ansem himself, which feels like the final boss. Then Sora loses Donald and Goofy, having to face first the dark side and then Ansem all by himself, proving that the Keyblade chose him for a reason. My dude Sora is one powerful kid. After that you enter some kind of void where you have to face Ansem once again, still alone, resulting in him having to rest. Of course you can't rest because Ansem's ship is one giant Heartless, and you have to fight parts of that to get Donald and Goofy back into your party. After getting them both back, it's time for the final showdown against Ansem, showing that yes, Sora is very powerful on his own, but the real thing his power comes from is his friend, a theme that runs through the entire series. I honestly think this fight on its own mechanically is not that great, but the story it tells and how that supports the entire narrative of the entire series doesn't just give it a spot on this list. As a matter of fact, it's the number 2 spot. But if this whole thing is just the number 2 spot, what will be next? Of course, before we get into the number 1 spot, there will be a couple of honorable mentions, so let's roll those real quickly now. Riku, possessed by Ansem. Okay, hear me out here. this fight is not mechanically the best. As a matter of fact, I think it's too super bossy to be a story-based fight. The reason also isn't because Riku has a Keyblade, although I must admit nostalgia might have lifted his entry from the number 2 to the number 1 spot. No, this fight represents so much more. You start the game out with Riku on the islands as best friends. You can even fight him there, and it's clearly the most difficult fight you can find on all of the islands. Then you both leave that world, and Sora finds himself with the Keyblade, making new friends. And Riku finds himself slowly sinking into the darkness, eventually constructing a Keyblade of his own. The darkness Riku's heart possesses him in the form of Ansem, Seeker of Darkness. And all that isn't even the main reason for this fight being in this spot. You remember how I talked about Maleficent? Throughout most of the game you're building up to the battle with her. But then, when you get closer, you can see Riku developing a lot of dark power, and when you eventually beat her, it turns out she wasn't that big a deal after all, and Riku has taken over her work for being the main bad guy. He has become more powerful than Maleficent could ever dream. And then on top of that, you find out it's not only Maleficent that's no threat to you, Riku isn't either. It's all about Ansem. So this fight takes your attention away from the previous bad guy, only to direct it into an unexpected direction right away again. Plot twists don't have to blow your mind to be written well, you know. That was my top 5 lists of Kingdom Hearts 1 boss fights, but I would really like to know what are your top 5. Leave them down below in the comments and I'll read them and we can have a discussion about them. Until the next time, I'll see you all later. Bye.